Okay, MrMostDaysOff, now we're ready for the TeePublic ad.
Head over to tpublic.com/bestdarndiddly right now to support our show. Get yourself some Best Darn Diddly merchandise and help grow our podcast. I messed up there. Can I get another take?
Okay, just a second.
Out of the way, amateur. Hey, it's Krusty. Go to tpublic.com/bestdarndiddly. Hey, it's Krusty. Go to patreon.com/bestdarndiddly. Go to popthreads.com and save 15% with the discount code Simpsons. Hey, it's Krusty. Go to bestdarndiddly.com to get all your podcast needs from the greatest show on earth. Learn from a professional, kid.
All right, Krusty, we're ready for your take. Krusty?
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. This is a weekly podcast for anyone who loves The Simpsons, or ever has loved The Simpsons, hosted by two dudes that grew up on The Simpsons. My name is Miles, better known as MrMostDaysOff, and today we have a fan favorite villain returning to the podcast, not as a guest, but on the show that we are in fact reviewing. When I say "are," I of course mean myself and your co-host with the most, Richie the WizKid. How you doing today, Rich?
You got me a little excited there. I thought we were going to have the Sideshow Bob on as a guest. Not Kelsey Grammer, but the actual Sideshow Bob. And then you had to go and put that knife in my back. I can't anymore. I quit.
I really need to learn to watch my words.
Phrasing, right? And not in the Archer sense. Man, I got to tell you, watching this episode, through most of it, I was like, wow, I forgot how good this episode is. And I was really, really loving it up until, like, the last 3 minutes.
Ooh. A little less enthused than you thought you would be towards the end, huh?
Yeah, I can go ahead and say a little bit. I think it wraps up a little too easily. And I think they ran out of time, which I'm sure you'll talk about here in just a second. And I think they just kind of got to the point where they just had to have it end. But there's so much good build-up through the whole episode, and I was like, oh, there's so much coolness going on, oh, and it's gone. But anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself and yourself. I better throw it back to you. I forgot about that part. The man, the myth, the mayor to Wigager. It is Miles.
And if it is not clear, today we are talking about the Sideshow Bob episode, Sideshow Bob Roberts, which originally aired on October 9th, 1994. The title of this episode is actually a parody of the movie Bob Roberts, starring Tim Robbins, which is a movie about political some sort of political corruption, we'll go with. I didn't look it up that much. I just know that it's a parody of the movie Bob Roberts. This is a very full episode, which may account for what Richie was talking about, where it wraps up very, very quickly, but it was such a long-running episode that it had a very short credit sequence. We went straight from the opening clouds where the Simpsons emerge in yellow and immediately went to the part where the television was playing the credits. No chalk gag, no couch gag, none of it. We are straight into the episode.
I thought there was something wrong with the device I was watching it on because I was like, whoa, did I just skip everything? And I tried a couple times and I was like, oh, yeah, that's just the episode.
It did actually almost feel like a DVD skip or something of that nature. You're right. It's funny how it felt a little bit unnatural just from what we've seen in the past. When they've done shortened credits in the past, they've usually included the part where the Simpsons, start at the couch gag at least. This time they didn't have any of it.
You'll have none, sir.
But we do have something that we haven't had in a while, and that is the first appearance of a minor character that'll make several appearances in the future. Political talk show host Birch Barlow, who is a parody of someone, but they wanted on commentary, which featured Matt Groening, David Merkin, Josh Weinstein, and Bill Oakley. They made it very clear that they were not parodying Rush Limbaugh, because he is known to be very litigious.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I guess I'll just throw that name out of my brain whenever I see Barlow talking.
Since we brought it up, though, unrelated to the show, Rush Limbaugh, of course, is a very well-known, very conservative talk radio show host known to have some pretty, what do I want to say? He's got some very right-wing views that many do not tend to agree with. I'm sure he has his fan base, and most of them probably voted for Trump. But that's neither here nor there. This episode opens up on a shot of KBBL radio. No sports, no rock, no information. For mindless chatter, we're your station.
All right, and then we get that mindless person Miles was just talking about with Homer eating donuts while at work.
On the apparently Homer Simpson is into Republican talk radio, which I knew that they depicted Homer as a Republican, but I did not think of him to be the type that would be into any political radio, frankly, let alone Rush Limbaugh. Birch Barlow type of DJ.
Counterpoint. Mr. Burns is part of the Republican headquarters, and with election time coming up, maybe he's making everybody listen to the radio at work.
You never know. That's true. He might be trying to spread that propaganda, and he's got the money to influence people. They might be afraid of losing their jobs if they don't seem supportive of Mr. Burns' beliefs.
No, he's brainwashing them with donuts and then playing all these conservative talk radio programs in the background, so subconsciously they're already leaning right.
I do really like, however, since you said right, on the radio, Birch Barlow is actually announced as the author of the well-selling book, Only Turkeys Have Left Wings.
Oh, man.
Oh, little good political humor right there. And while Homer thinks this is hilarious, Lenny and Carl actually walk in and they're more or less disgusted with Homer listening to this guy. It just makes them uncomfortable listening to his craziness.
I mean, he said Ted Kennedy lacked integrity. Can you believe that, Miles?
No, guys. I'm not very political. I usually think people who vote are a bit fruity. But for some reason, this Birch Barlow really speaks to me. And this is such a great transition shot because we actually go from Homer sitting there listening to the radio at his workstation, eating donuts, and they transform it into Birch Barlow, who's at the radio station, also eating donuts. So I guess they do have at least that thing in common.
Yeah, but this is so like... And again, it's going to be hard not to get a little political in this podcast, but the way Barlow opens up is so...
As long as Trump doesn't show up. He's not invited back until our 100th episode.
If I remember correctly, he got... Oh, wait, no, that hasn't happened yet. Sorry, I was going to say he got...
Spoiler alert! Come on, Richie, keep it kayfabe.
We already recorded that, so I thought... Anyways... I just like how Barlow goes right into the super, I'm going to call the other side, not freedom likers and super Democrats and or whatever Grandpa would call them. But it's just like, this seems appropriate for a right-wing conservative radio talk show host to say when he opens up with, "Good morning, fellow freedom likers. Birch Barlow, the fourth branch of government, the 51st state."
The 51st state.
So literally he goes from freedom likers to talking about stuff that has nothing to do with our actual government by changing it, which is anti-conservative.
You know, he does have a point though, Richie, because there are in fact 3 things that they're never going to get rid of in Springfield. The bats in the public library, Mrs. McFearley's compost heap, and third, our 6-term mayor, the illiterate, tax-cheating, wife-swapping, pot-smoking, spendocrat Diamond Joe Quimby.
Hey, I am no longer illiterate.
And I love during this sequence, he's actually watering his pot plant, which he grows in the mayor's closet, by the way. I'm all for that and, legalize it already, but by God, mayor, at least grow it in the closet of your home, not your office. So Homer is completely hooked on this Republican propaganda, but more surprisingly, at the Simpsons' home, so is Lisa, and we know she is far from a Republican. Marge is upset because you know how she feels about having controversial things in the house, but Lisa explains that she has to listen to it for a school report. Bart sees an
Okay.
opportunity here as he pulls out some fireworks and says that he is also planning something for school using said fireworks. But Marge is, of course, not buying that nonsense. And she just tells her son, I wish you would stop lying like that, as she washes his precious rockets down the sink, Richie. As a former 10-year-old who also loved
youth.
fireworks, I was heartbroken if I would have seen, just to imagine that many fireworks going down the drain, quite literally.
The funny part about this, though, is the way Bart says it, because he goes, well, I'm doing a school project on fireworks. So it looks very bad from Marge's point of view. You can understand completely why she does what she does.
You totally can, and of course the big payoff is the next day at school when we see Principal Skinner offering a special send-off to say Gong Hai Fat Choi to the visiting Chinese principals, and Principal Skinner even announces that Bart Simpson, the usual troublemaker, has offered a special presentation of a fireworks display to honor these foreign principals. This is great because Skinner looks at Bart, who, of course, is very upset because he has nothing. And this is maybe the heartbreaking part, is he gets an F in fireworks, the one thing he's most skilled at school. Another great moment here, too, though, because we see 3 Chinese principals, and they're very upset. All week, he promises big firework display.
Bad student.
Bad principal. And I love this because I just got done watching the show Cobra Kai, which is fucking amazing, by the way. And this is straight out of the book of Miyagi, which is brilliant because, as Mr. Miyagi once said, there is no such thing as a bad student, only a bad teacher. And that's exactly what these men are saying about none other than Seymour Skinner, who prides his entire life on being known as a good principal.
And
there's so many layers of just these delayed jokes that are just fantastic.
It's literally like 20 seconds, maybe 30 seconds between the kitchen scene with Marge and the school auditorium. But like you said, there's so much packed into those moments there, which is why it's
like
so
there
funny.
Wasn't a lost moment. Yeah, every single word had impact and meaning.
I think you would have felt bad if Bart just got an F. You'd have been like, oh, that's really sad because he's good at that. But they throw in the Skinner jab too. And that's like, it's supposed to be sad, but he's always kind of sad, which makes it hilarious.
Right. He's a very sad character by definition. And that often is the case.
See, you're laughing right now about it.
It's hard not to laugh about. While things are going pretty rough for Bart at school in a real twist of ironic fate, I guess, Lisa is actually maybe having it just as rough as she's still having to endure more of this Birch Barlow nonsense as she and Homer are driving on the way home. I do love Birch referring to those Democrats and their bleeding heart smell fair program.
Dad, I had to listen to this jerk all morning. Can we listen to something else?
When I'm driving the car, I get to choose the radio station. When you're driving, we'll listen to your radio station. And we get a fantastic transition here because we do a close-up zoom-in on the radio, which is now changed to playing the St. Elmo's Fire theme. And as we pan out, we see that Lisa is happy as can be driving the car while Homer sits nervously in the passenger seat.
I can't take this anymore. Let's switch back.
So they switch roles and back to the same radio station once again. And that's when a very familiar voice comes over the radio.
Hello, Birch. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Kudos for bringing the public back to the Republican Party. It's high time people realize we conservatives aren't all Johnny hate-mongers, Charlie Bible thumps, or even, God forbid, George Bushes.
That sounds like Sideshow Bob!
Yes, ma'am. Sideshow Bob yakking it up on the old yak box.
Dad, I'll spare you the embarrassment of admitting you don't know who Sideshow Bob is.
Phew!
And that's when we actually get a pretty fun little sequence that gives us a recap of the Sideshow Bob character going all the way back to season 1. And you know what? I don't know if we can recap it any better than Lisa can.
Sideshow Bob used to be Krusty the Clown's sidekick. In 1990, he framed Krusty for armed robbery and Bart got him put in jail.
Uh-huh.
When he got out, he married Aunt Selma and tried to murder her.
Oh, Sideshow Bob.
And again, that's just another great thing with Dan doing that, because it's all about inflection and stressing different syllables in the same word give completely different effects. If you go Sideshow Bob, Bob is the word with inflection, but when you go Sideshow Bob, the show is the inflection, and it completely changes the line, and it makes it incredibly funny, that small little detail.
It really is great, and he's such a talented voice actor, just actor in general, but this, Homer's very small sentences are actually sometimes more impressive than his long-winded tirades, which are also hilarious. It's just that he can do so much with so little, very similar to how Julie Cadmer can do so much with that groan, and in different situations, that groan can actually mean different things and work in different situations, and you just cannot say enough good things about this voice cast. There's a reason they're paid as much as they're paid.
And on for 30 seasons here coming up.
Yeah, definitely. Regardless of that, though, Homer doesn't seem too concerned with Sideshow Bob, but but Lisa is, and she rushes into Bart's room when they get home to let him know that his mortal enemy is on the radio. When Bart goes to turn on the radio, though, it's not Bob. In fact, it's Marty from KBBL announcing, and now it's time for more Dementia with Dr. Demento.
Ah!
But Lisa, of course, says, no, not Dr. Demento. Your other mortal enemy, Sideshow Bob.
Sideshow Bob? Oh, I'm only 10 and I already have 2 mortal enemies.
Which, real quick, I'll point out that Dr. Demento is, in fact, a real-life radio DJ known for being very wacky. He's actually been on the air for a very long time. He's currently 77, and he's still on the air to this day. His career started in 1970.
Wow.
He's done some very obscure comedy and things that he's been called out on that were just, cringe-worthy things to have to go through. But he also has a pretty strong following of fans, and again, to have a career that's still spanning to this day, he's clearly got an audience. Good for him.
Nice. If you're doing it that long, then you've got fans, like you said, so maybe we'll be on in 50 years still.
Oh, that's a good thought to think of.
We're going to need to come up with some other shows.
Yeah.
Or The Simpsons might still be on.
The Simpsons just keep going, dude, and
yeah.
this will just eventually we'll catch up, and it'll be a weekly live recap where we'll just review the show each Sunday after they play it live, or, after the episode airs, or whatever. You know what I'm trying to say.
And now we're canceled again.
Yeah, it always happens.
So speaking of being canceled, let's go to the Springfield Retirement Center because those people are about to be canceled. Was that too dark?
Well, Mayor Quimby is there trying to connect with the people of Springfield because Bob, by the way, we didn't mention it too much, but he's more or less making some points that he feels that he could make the city a better place if it weren't for Mayor Quimby, and we're quickly setting up for Sideshow Bob himself to be a political candidate. So Quimby's on the road. He's trying to win the voters because, he's basically been running unopposed for however long and hasn't really had to work at it. So he decides to start with the elderly.
For 6 years, I think they said, or something.
Yeah,
yeah,
forever. They have a new proposed expressway, and
it's gripe at the mayor night too, by the way. At the Springfield Retirement Castle.
Oh, very nice. Well, Abe and Jasper just want to know what's in it for them. So Quimby's like, well, what do you people like?
Sleep.
Sexy dames and plenty of them.
Matlock!
Well, I suppose I could name it the Matlock Expressway.
Yay!
I love how often they reference Matlock in this. In the commentary, Matt Groening said that he thought it was Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein that came up with it, but they in fact credited another writer I forgot to write down. I apologize. And they just took responsibility for keeping that joke going probably way longer than it should have.
But it always pays off.
It's pretty funny most of the time, and it's a good reference.
The only through line in Simpsons.
We get back to Springfield Elementary School with Bart Simpson listening to his Walkman in class, though this was in an age before we had discrete earbuds like we do now, so It was pretty obvious. He was trying to hide it, but it wasn't really working. We have Sideshow Bob on the radio once again having a conversation with Birch Barlow.
But it would be terribly myopic of me to blame all my current woes on one spiky-haired little simpleton.
Myopic, or to say the least, intransigent. Now, you have mentioned some woes there.
Well, you see, Birch, I'm presently incarcerated.
And we see it in the prison, like he's on the phone on the wall, and there's things like weapons and toilet paper and burning things. Like it's like a prison riot is going on around him.
Convicted of a crime I didn't even commit. Ha! Attempted murder? Now, honestly, what is that? Do they give a Nobel Prize for attempted chemistry? Do they?
I love that logic so much. And as he's making this very valid point, mind you, a toilet is actually thrown his direction that he barely ducks out of the way of.
Oh, really now? This is a personal call.
Barlow goes on to explain that this is just typical Democratic behavior, locking up an intellectual conservative just because he's, got some alternative ideas like wanting to kill a 10-year-old boy. Total malarkey, if you do ask these Republicans themselves.
But we do agree with the Selma killing policy.
Barlow is actually now making a big scene and really starting to get some momentum going for Bob's cause. Even at Moe's, which they almost never have political talk on, they have the radio listening to Birch Barlow discuss the idea that Bob is a political prisoner.
All right, you heard the man. 1 grenade each.
So Moe is preparing for the riots to, I guess, go break him out or whatnot. But Barney is quick to point out, Moe, I think he meant through nonviolent grassroots political action.
Ah, geez, really, you think so? All right, give him back. Come on, everybody, give him back. Hey, who pulled out the pin on this one?
And we very quickly cut away so that we do not see the absolute chaos and devastation that's going to be inflicted upon Springfield as we lose many lives in a relatively small town, I should say.
I don't know why I could not stop laughing at that joke. That one got me for some reason. This one, especially because he's like holding it up, making everybody look at it. Who pulled the pin on this one? Like, freaking hold it, man! Like,
yeah, hold the rail
trigger,
out or whatever. Yeah, exactly. I also laughed at that a lot, but I have to admit I laughed even harder at the next newspaper headline. They often do that transition where it'll be like a spinning newspaper, and that was the case here, where we see Bob Pardon, #1 local issue, and underneath it says, edges out no fat chicks ordinance.
Which is probably a Quimby issue right there.
More than likely a Quimby issue, but every time I see anything that references no fat chicks, I laugh my ass off because I have a memory of a time I went to a Hastings video, and there's this type of person in Texas, for those of you who aren't familiar with our area, where they drive ridiculously oversized trucks, yet they have no ranch or farm where this thing would be needed. They just have
small penises.
Tiny penises. That's what I was going to say too. Yeah, it's got to be a
tiny penis syndrome.
Yeah, a tiny penile situation going on. But I go to this Hastings, and this jackass in this giant truck who takes up like two parking spots because his truck's too big for society. And
they park sideways, so they actually take up like 4 or 5 parking spaces.
On the back of his mirror, as if it were his last name, it said "No Fat Chicks," which already it's like, what a fucking douchebag. But just to make this even more brilliant, if not one of the largest women I have ever seen, pulls out and steps out of the side of his pickup truck, and they go into the store together. And don't get me wrong, I am not fat shaming anyone. I have dealt with weight issues myself, and I think there are many beautiful people that come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. However, if you are a douchebag who specifically states that you do not like fat chicks, I just can't imagine that that woman is feeling great about herself, because it's not like she was like, oh no, I'm just a plump woman. This was a woman who had a very high percentage of body fat. So just speaking on scientific terms, this had to have made her at least feel a little bit cringy and bad inside.
Whoa. I'm going to come to the defense of both of these people right now. The sign said no fat chicks.
Oh, they're allowed to have one.
You're allowed to have one.
That's what it is. One fat chick is allowed. My bad.
You got to bring it back to the Simpsons.
That's
here.
what it is, definitely. So Quimby sees that the demands for this are in, that the people want Bob pardoned. They want him released from prison. Very well. If that's the way the winds are blowing, let no one say I don't also blow. By special order of the mayor of Springfield, you are hereby granted a full and complete pardon. Congratulations, Robert Underdunk Terwilliger. We actually see Bob released from his prison, which, by the way, just for some juxtaposition later in the episode, mental note on this, this is like the most maximum of securities. It's basically The Rock from the hit 1990s film, The Rock, where it's like it's Alcatraz. It's like a island inescapable prison. Unfortunately, Bob is not given the notice that the boat actually launches on the opposite side of the gate that he exited, because he steps off the cliff and falls screaming into the water. We see Sideshow Bob shake his now wet hair, and to the point where a fish actually flies out of it, and he gives that classic just look that only Bob can give. It reminds me very much of the time he just kept stepping on rakes, where he has this just pitifulness about him that is very much Sideshow Bob. And that is actually how we end our first act. And on that note, we're going to be right back. We're going to take a quick break to hear from some buddies of ours.
Good evening, future passengers. Are you ready to sit back, relax, and join us on a ride of epic proportions through the mystical land of randomness?
Am I a serial killer if I eat Lucky Charms?
What would it be like if horror characters ran a gym? Who would run spin class?
When a shark jumps out of the water, is it like suffocating for that split second?
So join us every week for a brand new derailment with Goobs, Ripkin, and Jenny Bean.
You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at The Derailers.
And don't forget to subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, and also on YouTube. Have a great night or day, folks.
We come back to the second act, where a very sinister-looking castle is in the background with a sign that says Republican Party Headquarters. It basically looks like the castle from He-Man, the one that the Dark Skull, Skeletor would reside in. It's like this, yeah, it's just this really, really awful, evil-looking place, and it's full of some familiar faces from Springfield, and some that we didn't know lived in Springfield, like Count Chocula, for instance.
I thought that was him.
Yeah. I also included Rainier Wolfcastle, Birch Barlow, of course, Mr. Burns, as we had already mentioned. And Mr. Burns actually seems to be leading the pack. He kind of calls everybody to order, and he more or less says they need a candidate to defeat Joe Quimby, who is causing them all sorts of problems.
There's also, you didn't mention Dr. Hibbert, and a younger rich Texan is the best description I can give, are the other two members seated at the table at this time.
And Birch Barlow is also way ahead of everyone in terms of that, charismatic candidate that the Republican Party needs. He's already thinking Sideshow Bob. And he's even invited him there to it's an evil meeting. I don't know what else to call it.
What I like is he says he's got the next great candidate to be the mayor of Springfield right on the other side of his door. And when they all look outside the doorway, it's just a water cooler.
And nothing else there. Yeah, and they're all excited. He does have charisma. But, of course, it's, no, it's Bob. Bob, come on in.
A fine mahoke to you all.
Why, he's even better.
I agree. I like the human touch.
The human touch. So, Bob is it. Bob is the man for the Republican Party, it seems. Sideshow Bob going up against Joe Quimby. And their first place that they will be appearing together to debate. They went old to begin with, now they're going young. They're going to the Springfield Elementary School. And I have to say, Bob gets credit here for, if nothing else, knowing his audience. Because they go into the debate, and Bob essentially just pulls out his old sideshow clowning tricks. He does flipping and jumping around. He does weird shit with his body to like make himself, like, what is it called? Contortion. And he just essentially really captivates the younger audience, and Quimby just has nothing to compete with that.
And I do want to mention, when we saw the scene previously with Quimby at the retirement center, Bob has not spoken to the old folks yet. And we learn from The Simpsons in a future episode that typically the vote to get is the old people vote, because they're the only ones that vote in masses. So Quimby would still have a leg up, even if you got a bunch of kids that aren't old enough to vote to like you.
That's true. But I think it just goes to show that Bob is, in fact, very charismatic.
He knows how to play an audience.
Because even though he's attempted to kill one of their classmates multiple times at this point, he's still applauded by the Simpsons school.
He wants you to sell your future short.
Well, Lisa comes up with a brilliant plan. She grabs Bart and says, "We've got to act fast," and they go and tackle Mayor Quimby, who at first reacts as such. He actually thinks he's being attacked, but Bart and Lisa basically play to the camera saying, "Oh, Mayor Quimby's so nice and we love him so much. He was just saying how kids are the best resource."
More important than coal?
Yes.
And I did have a bit of an issue with this scene, because at the beginning of the scene, it looked like Bart and Lisa were in the front row of this little display. And then when Lisa starts whispering to Bart, like, "Hey, we have to do something," all of a sudden they're in the second
They're like
row.
behind people, yeah. That's a good observation.
No, it was a little unclear to me if that's what actually happened, or if there's something else going on.
I just really think it's funny that at this point, even in a high-profile situation, Bob has such easy access to kidnap Bart, even if only for a short distance, and to technically give him a ride home. But either way, he grabs Bart against his will. Yeah, that's true. Bad principle. But it's like, did nobody notice there was cameras on him? I mean, what the hell?
Barlow would find a way to make him look good. But
that was a big mistake, Bart. No children have ever meddled with the Republican Party and lived to tell about it.
Which is a really dark joke.
It is. It straight up looks like Bart is about to be murdered by Bob and two goons, who he actually has, like, essentially two henchmen by his side. And according to the commentary, those are actually based on two real-life advisors, political advisors for Richard Nixon during Watergate, and they're by the names of John Ehrlichman and H.R. Holderman. Those men were essentially drawn to depict those, or to be a parody of those two guys. And it's, of course, the big reveal is, instead of pulling out guns and killing Bart, they actually pull out an elephant pin and a "Vote for Bob" pin, slap them both on Bart, and then toss him into his front yard. Homer is essentially being tossed out of the car in the same manner his son was, but this time, instead of a political rival, it's by none other than the Archie Comics crew. I don't know all of them, but I know Archie and Veronica, and there's others. And
Moose.
Well, either way, they say,
"Duh, stay out of Riverdale." Which, Riverdale has a live-action series now. Is that saying something about The Simpsons?
I don't have any idea.
Oh, wait, actually, Simpsons had the live-action couch gag opening first, so Simpsons did it.
You lost me, but I will say on the commentary track, they actually talk specifically about this little reference and how they don't feel that in today's age, which, mind you, on this commentary, they're in 2004. So think about how much things have changed even further. But they said at that time, compared to the 90s when this episode released, they probably would not be able to get away with that joke, because at the time this episode aired, it wasn't as litigious of a society. It wasn't everybody's first response to sue. But by 2004, they probably would not have done a joke like that where they had an external property come into their show because they'd be worried that the people at Archie Comics would sue them for use of their images. So it's just kind of a sad thing that our world has gone that way, because I don't think in any way, shape, or form that was anything other than just like a little nod of adornment, or, you know, it was a positive thing to Archie. I don't think they were like calling him out for anything negative. It's probably because somebody at The Simpsons is a fan of Archie Comics.
They need to open each episode now with any person or persons that look familiar, just a coincidence.
Well, I guess they kind of make up for it now because they do the openings where they actually work with other people, like the people at Rick and Morty, and, you know, they've done several of their own variations of the opening credits.
Exactly.
Don't.
Back to our plot. Bob is firmly starting to gain popularity in the polls, and Quimby decides he needs to answer with a commercial. And oh, what a glorious commercial it is.
Without a Mayor Quimby, our town would really stink. We wouldn't have a tire yard or mid-sized roller rink. We wouldn't have our gallows or our shiny Bigfoot traps. It's not the mayor's fault that the stadium collapsed.
Quimby, if you were running for mayor, he'd vote for you. Paid for by the Mayor Quimby for Mayor Mayoral Committee. I know that one of your favorite vote jokes in this in this series, I should say, is the sex. Now that I've got your attention, but I have to be honest, I actually like this one even better. It cracks me up so much to hear Quimby saying, or to say, if you were running, he'd vote for you. Just like, oh, let's just trade, and it's so public and open. It's like, who cares about policy?
I love the look on his face and how he holds up his arms when the stadium's collapsing in the background. Like,
it's like a shrug, like, oh, it could have happened to anybody. Bart and Lisa are doing their part for the current mayor as well. They're trying to pass out bumper stickers and show their support for Mayor Quimby. And actually, the bumper stickers are moving pretty quick. But right after that, we see Jimbo approach the table, and I think we figure out the mystery of how come they're going through their product so fast.
Yeah. I love Grimby. Can I have some more bumper stickers, please, dude?
Bart gives him some more, and we see what's going on. They're wrapping Millhouse mummy style with vote for Quimby bumper stickers, and then they decide to throw him down the hill, essentially, yelling, "All right, the mummy's ready for his mystical journey."
Literally a rolling ad, I would say.
But poor Millhouse can't actually see. He's just like, what's happening?
I love right before that Lisa says, to promote Quimby, this time he's the lesser of two evils.
Totally. You had just pointed out that Sideshow Bob has not met with the elderly yet, but that is about to change. And when presented with the idea that Quimby promised them the Matlock Expressway,
Matlock!
He said, "I'll see your expressway, and I'll raise you actually spending the afternoon sitting here and listening to all of your interminable anecdotes."
Interminable anecdotes. Hot ziggity-zaw, me first! Not many people know I own the first radio in Springfield. Weren't much on the air then, just Edison reciting the alphabet over and over. A, he'd say, then B. C would usually follow. C would usually follow.
I love that. C would usually follow, but I think that Bob would literally walk through an entire field of rakes at this point, then have to listen to the rest of the alphabet story.
Them's fighting words right there.
And immediately after this visit, we get yet another great commercial parody, and I did not realize this, but on the commentary they briefly referenced the idea that this was in fact a parody of a real-life ad that was aired by Dukakis when he ran against George Bush, and at the time it was actually considered it didn't go over very well, and he was accused of race baiting among other things. But I didn't look too much into that, but I just wanted to point out that this is, in fact, a parody of a real-life ad that ran in the late 80s, early 90s. We see a narrator... We see an image of the Springfield prison that literally has a revolving door and an escalator that takes inmates over the fence to freedom. Mayor Quimby supports revolving door prisons. Mayor Quimby even released Sideshow Bob, a man twice convicted of attempted murder. Can you trust a man like Mayor Quimby? Vote Sideshow Bob for mayor. It's so ludicrous, but then when you watch these actual real-life political ads that these are similar to, it's not far off for how stupid they are most of the time.
The real-life mudslinging that has gone on in politics, especially with smear campaigns, are ridiculous. You can't believe people actually fall for some of the stuff, but it's happened and it's proven to work, or else they wouldn't do it.
We're all sheep. It's sad.
I hope not.
We see that Mayor Quimby is going to actually debate Sideshow Bob, and it's going to be hosted by Larry King.
The League of Uninformed Voters presents the Springfield mayoral debates. I'm your moderator, Larry King. Now, a word to our audience. Even though we're being broadcast on Fox, there's no need for obnoxious hooting and hollering.
So, of course, the audience goes, woo-hoo-hoo-you!
Oh.
Unfortunately for Quimby, not only does he not have the natural charisma that Sideshow Bob seems to have, but he's also battling a cold. It's okay, though, because Bart has some medicine for him, and he gives him an entire handful.
I hope that flu doesn't affect his performance out there.
Don't worry, Lise. He's taken 1 million of these capsules. And they look down, and the music does a great job of making this a very strong moment, because it goes dun dun dun, as we see that it's the extra drowsy formula.
And I assume this next scene is a somewhat parody of the JFK-Richard Nixon debate that was on live television, because in that debate, JFK looked like the fancy young gentleman that everyone loved, and Nixon was actually battling, I think, the flu in that.
He had just gotten over it, I believe, yeah. And,
so he looked awful, whereas like people in the audience said JFK clearly won it, but people listening on the radio said Nixon actually won because he brought up a lot of good points.
Yeah, I believe that was the age that television had just more or less become a pretty much a staple in the home, and the majority of the public actually saw it on television as opposed to the radio. A lot of historians feel that made a huge impact.
Absolutely, and that will change the political landscape going forward. It's about how you present yourselves.
It very much is. It's an interesting thing to think about, these little minor details that shouldn't make any effect at all, but actually may entirely shift our entire society. Whoa, my mind's blown. Let's watch cartoons. We hear Birch Barlow asking Sideshow Bob the first question. Councilman Les Winan says that you're not experienced enough to be mayor. Sir, what do you have to say about that?
I'd say that Les Winan ought to do more thinking and less whining.
Hey, there's no Councilman Les Winan.
Good line, though.
So on the commentary, they said that this line, this entire joke, which they absolutely all love, and so do I, it's a very funny line, this joke was written by none other than Mike Reese. Remember that name, it might be important.
Very interesting, Miles.
Mike Reese, though, they said he must have been off on his own for about 10 minutes, just kind of jumbling this over and over in his brain, and then he just brought it down and laid it out, and everybody loved it.
It's great. I love the aspect of how they come up with some of these things.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and this does so sound like something a squirmy politician would say too if they had the opportunity. It's a great joke. But this is a debate after all, so Quimby is also going to get a chance to answer a question. Mayor Quimby, you're well known, sir, for your lenient stance on crime. But suppose for a second that your house was ransacked by thugs. Your family tied up in the basement with socks in their mouths. You try to open the door, but there's too much blood on the knob.
What is your question?
My question is about the budget, sir.
Oh,
what is this? On Fox? Oh, yeah, it is, actually. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And just to prove your point about the television versus radio thing, Mayor Quimby's sweating bullets, again, not feeling well, and he kind of wipes his hair back, and unfortunately, it just so happens to stick in a way that it looks like he has actual devil horns. Though, on TV, it also appears to have a ring of fire around his face, though there was a disclaimer, to Fox News' credit, to be entirely fair, that those flames were added digitally in post.
Flames added electronically by Channel 6.
So yeah, at least they're honest that they're lying, if that makes sense.
I'm not sure if it was added digitally just yet in 1994.
Electronically, you're so right. My mistake.
Not quite there yet, but we're getting close.
Whatever. They had digital dinosaurs. They could probably do digital flames in 95. I think it's a thing.
No, those dinosaurs are real. What are you talking about?
Well, the debate is over. It is what it is for Quimby for now, and it's just going to be up to the Springfieldians' votes to determine who the next mayor is going to be. And we actually get to see a couple of those decisions, including Homer, who doesn't agree with Bob's Bart killing policy, but I do approve of his Selma killing policy. And we see him vote for Bob. And then, of course, Krusty the Clown has a little bit of history with Bob.
Well, he framed me for armed robbery, but man, I'm aching for that upper class tax cut.
God damn it. How is this so on the nose? This episode aired in 95, but it's still so on point.
There's a lot of parallels. Yeah, there's a lot of parallels.
The commentary, specifically Merkin, liked to point out at this time that he loves the fact that he knows that evil will always rise again to power because it makes their jokes stay relevant even years later.
And twirling. Always twirling.
So we cut to Kent Brockman, who is reading the results of the election. For Sideshow Bob, 100%. For Joe Quimby, 1%. And we do remind you there is a 1% margin of error.
Poor Quimby.
I wonder what the voter turnout was, however, because it's hard to believe every single resident of Springfield would want to vote for Sideshow Bob, even as charismatic as he is. I mean, like, think about it. Marge would want to vote for Quimby, right? Maybe that's the 1%.
Maybe she didn't vote.
That's what I mean. That's the voter turnout situation. That's always what gets them. That's always what gets them.
I think the issue with this, though, is they're pandering to the dumbness of the Springfield citizens throughout this whole episode. So I honestly think the voter turnout for this is probably higher than in any other public election that's been held in Springfield. I'm just assuming. It's because there's been nobody running against Quimby, so that's the big seat is the mayoral chair. So any other elections going on at the time you don't care about, so you're not going to vote. But in something like this, where someone's pointing out all the dumb things Quimby's done and that they can do it better, you're like, yeah, I want to help change this.
Well, I think we'll actually get to see how many voters there were at the end of the episode. I think the list that Lisa scrolls through, they may have announced how many people voted, so that's an interesting thing to consider too.
Yeah.
We do, however, see the former mayor, Quimby, looking quite depressed. His once full room for the race his pictures are falling off the wall. There are no celebratory balloons or speeches. It's just, for the first time in many years, Quimby is no longer the mayor of Springfield, and it has gone to Sideshow Bob, who is now ready to give his speech, which turns into just being a maniacal laugh. And just look how happy he is. And this deep, evil, maniacal laugh is what takes us to the end of our second act. But before we jump to our break, I just want to take a quick moment and say, once again, this was actually a very informative commentary. I think that sometimes less people on the track actually leads to more fun facts, just because they can all get in a little bit more, and there is only 4 guys on this commentary. So in this case, they talked about working with Kelsey Grammer, who loves doing the voice of Sideshow Bob. However, he hates doing Sideshow Bob's laugh, and he always requests every single time that they could maybe go back and just use some of his old recorded laughs, but the Simpsons insist on getting fresh laughs for the situation, because each laugh is just a little bit different.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I mean, it's a hard laugh to do for sure too, especially with how maniacal he sounds. So
It's very intense for sure. Absolutely.
yeah, I don't know how long that would take to get that just the way you need it to, but I mean, it's pretty evil when you hear it. You're like, well, clearly everyone made a terrible decision and they don't realize it. Kind of like, never mind.
What could he be referring to? Why don't you go and think about that while we take a very quick break, and we're going to be back in a moment with the conclusion of Sideshow Bob Roberts.
Every year, new TV shows get canceled. Some make it an entire season, and some don't even make it that far. I'm Ed, host of Unaired, where each week we review a show that was canceled with episodes left unaired, then pitch our ideas for what could have been future episodes of those shows. We've covered shows like Cavemen, the show based on the Geico Cavemen commercials, the ill-fated 2011 Wonder Woman pilot, a show called Look Well, where Adam West plays an aging TV detective who thinks he can solve real crimes, and many more. You can find us on iTunes, Google Play, unairedpodcast.com, or wherever you download podcasts. And remember, some things are better left unaired.
Hey guys, it's Richie the WizKid here from the Best Darn Diddly Review Show, and I'm here to talk to you about PopThreads.com, your number one source for finding awesome nerdy t-shirts. Are you sick from not knowing what to wear when you go out with all your friends on the weekends? Well, don't have a cow, man. Go to PopThreads.com, and if you use the code Simpsons at checkout, you can save 15% on all your t-shirt needs.
We come back for the final act of this episode and see that there's been a few changes in Springfield already. For one, the Matlock Expressway is actually under construction, so you have to give Bob credit. Quimby has been sitting in that office for a while, not making things happen. Bob has been in the office for seemingly a day or two, and they've already started construction. Unfortunately, though, for the Simpsons, it seems that the plans take the highway directly through their house. But Bob, being the fair mayor that he is giving the Simpsons 72 hours before he destroys the house and any Simpsons in it.
Ah! It's the rapture! Quick, get Bart out of the house before God comes! Smart man, that Homer.
I know what you're up to, Mayor Terwiggager, and no one in my family's gonna stand for it. Honk, honk, honk!
Move your goddamn house, son!
So Abe's clearly on board with the Matlock Expressway.
He's literally on board the expressway.
That's not the only change, though. It's not just the cityscape that's changing. The elementary school has some special requests from the mayor's office, primarily being that Bart Simpson is going to be held back.
Oh, you mean I have to repeat the 4th grade?
Well, yes, but not for 4 or 5 years. Bart, you're going to kindergarten.
Kindergarten?
Mrs. Krabappel comes by, popping a bottle of champagne. Ha! So, Bart, though, to be fair, seems to really be excelling in his new class. He gets almost every question the teacher asks right, and he's usually the first one with his hands up. He was able to identify a triangle, and that gave him first dibs on the Flintstones telephone at playtime. Yabba dabba doo! I like talking to you.
I can't tell you how many times I've said the Fred Flintstone line because of this episode. I don't know why when people just act a little off or a little goofy when we're talking, I always just end up going, yabba dabba doo, I like talking to you. And I don't know, it just always stuck with me. It was just so silly how Bart's so excited to be doing well in school.
I also really like the idea that Bart is just absolutely giddy with this, like, kid's toy. I mean, he does this, like, ridiculously just giggle that he does where he's just so excited to be talking to Fred Flintstone.
I think he's just excited that he's getting praise for doing a good job.
You know, that could be true. A lot of times Bart is probably lacking attention is his issue.
And it's just funny that the teacher is just totally going along with it, too. You think she'd be like, dude, you're a 4th grader, just shut up for a second and let one of the actual kids answer.
Well, Homer is determined to save his home. He doesn't want his family to end up living under a bridge like common trolls. And that's when Lisa realizes that she doesn't think Bob even won the election. She thinks he cheated. And I mean, Of course, this is just some fictitious cartoon world where elections never are shady or are rigged in any way, and they're always completely straightforward. But in this cartoon world, there has been some shenanigans, it seems.
And she can't believe a convicted felon would get so many votes and another convicted felon would get so few.
Lisa knows where to go. It's off to the Springfield Hall of Records, where a man very willingly seems to immediately give her a list of all 48,000 Springfield voters and who each one of them voted for.
I thought this was a secret ballot.
Meh. And that's when Lisa starts going through the list one by one, starting with Aaron A. Aronson, who voted for Bob, Aaron L. Aronson, who voted for Bob, Arthur B. Ablabab, who voted for Bob, and she starts to groan and actually gets a little bit sleepy as we pan out and we see she's in this giant circular room. And this is actually a parody of the movie All the Presidents. And it's one of the classic times The Simpsons does basically a shot-for-shot right out of that film. There's a specific scene from that movie that this is taken directly from.
Directly from above.
Exactly. Bird's eye, totally. We see as she's in her slumbering state, though, a shadowy figure approaches her and leaves an envelope in front of her. When she wakes up, she notices it, but doesn't see anyone else. And as she reads it, she's very clearly shocked by what it has to say.
What?
Immediately, we've got ourselves a little mystery going on, and
A little deep-throating.
Sure, in typical Simpsons kid fashion, when there's a mystery to be solved, they do tend, Bart and Lisa being them, tend to be a pretty admirable team in solving mysteries. I mean, they have busted Sideshow Bob together in the past. In this case, they decide they are in fact going to meet up with this mysterious stranger.
To the pay-in park and pay.
Bart and Lisa somehow talk their father into giving them a ride to meet up with a shadowy figure in a parking garage, and everything seems
where you have to pay twice.
Fine. yeah, right. We also see that he gives such little care that he's actually just reading an Archie comic, another reference to the product, while his kids go out and wait in the middle of the deserted parking lot.
Stuck-up Riverdale punks think they're too good for me.
As the shadowy figure approaches smoking a cigarette, a man's voice clearly says, "You're on the right track. Follow the names."
How the hell do you know?
I can't tell you who I am, but I worked on the campaign.
Hey, Mr. Smithers!
Honk, honk! We see Homer pull up and shine the lights directly on Waylon Smithers, who is now completely revealed. Well, you might as well give me a ride home now. I've never gone behind Mr. Burns' back before, but Sideshow Bob's ultra-conservative views conflict with my choice of lifestyle. All I can do is give you one name. Edgar Neubauer. Find him, and you'll find your answer.
Which, at this point, if you're going this far into it, why wouldn't you just tell them what's going on? And why would you interrupt Lisa while you're on the right track, but you pulled her away from the right track to tell her she's on the right track?
Yeah, you didn't actually offer any help here, Waylon. Not at all. I guess you gave the one name, but still. That might make it even harder, because before they were looking at a lot of names that could have helped them.
Well, at least you can skip from the A's to the N's now.
True. I mean, you don't have to worry about a gorilla.
Wait, they're real?
I love as Bart's combing through the phone book, that's an actual name he finds, and like myself, he also giggles.
That's in the next scene when they're trying to find the Neubauer name.
Yeah, that's true. They rush off to the Springfield library, and there's a great callback, because when they open up the file, the bats come flying out, just like they did at the beginning of the episode.
Well, we don't want to remove the bats from the old Springfield library.
But unfortunately, they hit another dead end, and Lisa even declares, "This is hopeless. They're going to demolish our house for sure, and we're going to have to live in a Motel 6.
But Dad can't afford $6 a night.
But just then, Bart looks up and sees something in the distance. Lise, come here. I found him. I found Edgar Neubauer. Unfortunately, though, or fortunately, I guess, because it helps crack the case, Edgar Neubauer was in fact found in the cemetery where he was buried, presumably all the way back when he died in 1909.
Oh my god, the dead have risen and they're voting Republican.
That might be my favorite line in the episode. This one's hard to say, but that's such a good line too. No, Bart, don't you see? Dead people can't vote. Prudence Goodwife died 1641. She voted for Bob. So did Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper. Which apparently on the Big Bopper's tombstone, there was the line or the epitaph, "Goodbye, baby." And that was a direct reference to one of his songs that opens with the line, "Hello, baby." Really inside joke.
One of the characters from The Crucible or The Scarlet Letter, one or the other. I don't know. One of those two.
I would assume. I thought she was a musician, or maybe I'm wrong because 1641. That wouldn't make sense. She's probably
the Salem witch trials. I would assume.
Yeah, there you go. I didn't actually bother to look her up. I recognize the other names as musicians.
Someone fact check us on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Lisa and Bart even noticed, though, that it's not just the dead Springfield people, also the pet cemetery, where votes from Mr. and Mrs. Bananas came, along with Humphrey Beauregard. And most sad of all, Lisa's poor dead kitty, Snowball 1.
All right, Bob. Now it's personal. Which he's gone after Bart 3 times already, so it's already been personal.
And her aunt, yeah, you're right. It should already be personal at this point, but now she's gone after Snowball 1, so it's really personal. We transition here, though, with another Springfield Shopper headline that says, "Call for probe and Bob Flap." And under that, why not let dead pets vote?
All right. It's time for me to bring up something that I've been looking forward to talking about a little bit. A lot of people might be watching this episode and think, wow, dead people voting, that would never fly in politics and that would be found out so easily. Well, this actually happened in real life in Texas, our home state, and it happened in a senatorial election in 1948. And it actually had a lot of ramifications for the outcome of this. And I don't know if you know about this, Miles, but a former president actually had dead people vote for him and help him win a Senate seat. I'm referring to Lyndon B. Johnson, old Landside Lyndon. And in 1948, he was up against a good old Texan who decided to throw his hat in the ring as well, named Coke Stevenson. And LBJ was going to lose. He was clearly going to lose, and he ended up winning by 87 votes.
Jeez.
Which is a very slim outcome. And that's actually how he got the name Landside Lyndon. It's actually a joke because he barely won. But when they go back and look, there were dead people that voted for LBJ. And not only did they vote for him, they voted for him in alphabetical order.
Well, that was convenient of them.
Yeah, it was very blatantly obvious what happened. And a lot of people rag on LBJ about this, especially because he took the good old boy Coke Stevenson down, who was just like, again, it's good old boy. Everything that makes you think old country Texan guy, this other guy was, and people adored him. And LBJ won, and if he didn't win this election, it was understood that he was just going to retire from politics, essentially. And after he won this, he ended up becoming the majority speaker in the House, and then he became the vice president to JFK, and then obviously after everything that happened with JFK, he became president. So that was a very slim slope from going from almost retiring to becoming president of the United States.
Another one of those moments like we talked about earlier with Nixon and JFK, where it's just like these little tiny things could have gone another way and it would have completely altered history. How fun to think about.
Well, the interesting thing to me is I couldn't find any information on this, but I took a collegiate course on Texas history with a young professor who was going for his doctorate. And if I remember correctly, this is over 10 years ago, but if I remember correctly, he said that it was found out pretty quickly within a few years that what had happened, and that when they asked Coke Stevenson why he didn't come forward with the information when he knew it was going on, he wouldn't give an answer, and it was kind of, people thought it wasn't, he didn't come forward with the information because he did it too. And I tried to Google information that if Coke Stevenson had dead people voting for him, I can't find anything on the internet, but I distinctly remember my teacher saying it was understood that it happened on both sides. So you can't call the other guy out for doing something when
because
you also
you'd be
did
called
it.
out too. That's fucked up that this election came down to the guy who cheated worse.
or better,
cheated better.
I guess.
Yeah.
But there's a famous quote where LBJ actually said, "Dead people have a right to vote too." So,
See, that part I almost have to say, no fucking way that's actually a quote. I'm going to have to Google that
no,
myself
it is. Later. He actually said he was recorded, not recorded. He was known to have said that to somebody when they went about it.
I'm just saying, there's no way that's in public record. I'm not saying it didn't happen.
That's a famous quote.
I'm saying that there's no way he said that on like a live mic or in like an interview or something. But
there wasn't. That stuff wasn't
tell.
around then. 1948, man. You know, LBJ was on the Democratic ticket. And back then, the Democrats were conservative, and a lot of Democrats left the party because LBJ was going to farms telling them about electricity, and all these good old boys didn't want to have anything to do with it. So after he won this senatorial seat, a lot of people were so upset with him that they went to the other side with their policies, and that's where you get the modern Republican, is from all these people that used to be hardcore Democrats that wanted strict government, went to the Republican side and changed the beliefs of the party. So a lot of people say the grand old party and blah, blah, blah. It's all bullshit, man. It's just when things don't work out for you, you switch sides and change the beliefs of the other side because that's what people in power do.
I appreciate the history lesson, though I'm going to go ahead and say at least part of this is at least partially attributed to the fact that a good story is way more entertaining than the truth anyway. But let's get back to The Simpsons, where
this time it really happened.
Where we see that the 72-hour window is closing in on the Simpsons' home. Those bulldozers are getting awfully close. Marge is actually literally standing in between them at this point. But
Gorilla will never get to talk with the Simpsons again.
But Bob has agreed to a town hall meeting just to appease Bart and Lisa, because after all, he wants to see that these children feel justice has been served. That way they can sleep soundly tonight on their hard, feculent motel pillows.
They better get themselves a lawyer.
And of course, who else to get but Lionel Hutz? Mr. Mayor, is it true you rigged the election?
No, I did not.
Kids, help. And that's when we see Lisa come up with a plan, quick on her feet as always. And she knows that if they play their cards right, they're going to trap Sideshow Bob. So she approaches Bob and says, I believe you when you say you're innocent.
Indeed I am.
We all know you're a naive pawn, a puppet, if you will, of the most diabolical political genius Springfield has ever known. Birchibald T. Barlow. You don't have the intelligence to rig an election by yourself, do you?
You were just Barlow's lackey.
You were Ronnie to his Nancy.
Sonny to his Cher.
Ringo to his rest of the Beatles.
Enough! Lies, lies, lies. I did it all. There.
We want the truth.
You want the truth? You can't handle the truth. No truth handler, you. Bah! I deride your truth-handling abilities.
Of course, this is an exact quote from A Few Good Men, word to word. Judge has to insist, though, that Bob gets to his point.
Only I could have executed such a masterpiece of electoral fraud, and I have records to prove it. Here, just look at these. Each one a work of Machiavellian art.
Even the judge is like, why? Why would you keep these very detailed records of your crimes labeled
all the
fraud
evidence
reference
on your person?
He's like, fraud records, volume 1 through 4.
Because you need me, Springfield. Your guilty conscience may force you to vote Democratic, but deep down inside, you secretly long for a cold-hearted Republican to lower taxes, brutalize criminals, and rule you like a king. That's why I did this, to protect you from yourselves. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a city to run.
Bailiffs, please place the mayor under arrest.
What? Oh, yes. All that stuff I did.
So the Simpsons family couldn't be happier. They get to keep their house. Bart gets to go back to the 4th grade, though, to be fair, he's actually a little disappointed because tomorrow they're going to find out who the dish ran away with.
The spoon, Bart.
Of course! And I love this little transition here, too, because Bart gets this, once again, gleeful smile on his face. Just inappropriately too happy to find out this information. And that's actually when they snap the picture that makes the front page of the newspaper the next day, where we once again see Sideshow Bob reading the paper from prison, declaring that someday he's going to have his vengeance.
Someday I'll have my vengeance. Someday, when I find my way out of the savage, roach-ridden cesspool.
Say, Terwilliger's a Yaley. Bob, come along. We need an 8th to row against the Princeton alums.
Princeton?
Stroke! 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 And we see Bob joining the rowing team at his minimal security prison. Even though he's cursing its name, it doesn't seem all that bad after all, as the credits fade and the end of the 3rd act comes to a close. I will point out real quick that minimum security prison is a spoof of the Allenwood minimum security prison, which at times was accused of basically being a country club for very wealthy criminals. And in this case, Bob being a Republican, after all, it seems like a natural fit. That does bring us to the end of Sideshow Bob Roberts. But before we get out of here, Richie, is there anything else that you or that book of yours wants to point out?
Well, you actually got most of the headlines that my guidebook told us about. The one thing it did point out that I wanted to mention was this is Larry King's 2nd stint on The Simpsons. I believe he's in One Fish, Two Fish, Blowfish, Bluefish, according to my guidebook, so I don't believe it. I read it. But other than that, I wanted to say, I talked about this at the beginning of the episode. I thoroughly enjoyed this episode. There's so many great moments in it, and it's up there on my list on the current season. My only issue with it is it ends so quickly. Like, Bob just immediately falls for the same old gig where we're going to sidetrack you with something where his ego is going to get the better of him and make him confess to all the stuff that he happens to have on it. But at least they go over the top when they do it. It's like they knew that they wrote themselves too long on the episode, so they just had all this evidence on his person to throw it out there. And that, it was funny because they went too far with it, but I feel like where it originated from was something that I didn't necessarily agree with. But other than that, again, great episode. I really love his rant about how your conscience wants you to vote Democratic, but deep down you secretly long for a cold-hearted Republican.
It's a great speech.
To rule you like a king. And I laughed when he said that because I was like, oh my God, it's still important even in today's political scheme and even in today's political climate.
I think I just really appreciate that The Simpsons does a good job of balancing their jabs. Like, I think this one is definitely more one-sided, where they take a lot more jabs at the Republicans than the Democrats. But that's not to say that the Democrats go unscathed. And there's plenty of other episodes that also poke fun at both sides. And The Simpsons does it in such a balanced way that it still maintains being an escape and, just not getting too political, even though this is one of the most political episodes we'll probably come across for a while. I know that Treehouse of Horror episode has a segment that's very political themed, but still, they always manage to have enough levity and balance that you're still enjoying The Simpsons. I will point out...
I think the Sideshow Bob aspect helps cover that up, too.
Absolutely.
You have that kind of guest that makes it okay to get political.
Well, and it's interesting, too, that Sideshow Bob is an evil Republican. I'm not going to say he's evil by any means, but Kelsey Grammer, the voice of Sideshow Bob, actually shares political aspirations just like Bob does. Kelsey Grammer is a registered Republican, and he has in the past declared that he would be interested not only in running for the mayor of New York, but also for the United States president if the opportunity ever came to be. Now, that was years ago that he said that, but at some point in his life, if not currently, he at least had the idea that that would be something he'd like to pursue. So maybe part of that fit well into helping Kelsey Grammer find that in the character to make this episode what it was.
Oh, awesome. It's like a platform for him to throw himself out there in a weird and twisted way.
Yeah, hopefully, though, he doesn't get associated with the same policies as Sideshow Bob. I don't think that would quite work. I don't think the United States is ready for his Bart killing or his Selma killing policy.
I don't know. A lot of the country may agree with him on the Bart killing principle right now. We don't, but a lot of other people might.
You never know. But that's going to do it for this week's Best Darn Diddly Review show. Richie, where can everybody find you online?
Well, firstably, Miles, let's start with the more important thing, our show. Follow that on Twitter, at Best Darn Diddly. That's DIDDLY. Also works on Facebook, Instagram, and your mom's house. Individually, you can follow me at theWiz_Kid23. Type it like I said it, folks.
You can follow me at MrMostDaysOff. That's going to work pretty much everywhere. Do us a favor and give us a review on iTunes. We can use them. They help. They make our show more visible, especially if you like us. If you're not a fan, actually, you can skip this part. Just go ahead and hit stop now and ignore the last 15 seconds or so. But for those of you who enjoy our show, please get on there. Leave an honest review. We're happy to hear your critiques, and we're always trying to get better. Other than that, we just want to say thank you so much, as always, for tuning in to the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. theWizKid and I look forward to being back with you again next week, when we're going to be reviewing a very special episode. You know how much I love the Treehouse of Horrors, and we're reviewing Treehouse of Horror 5. Plus, we're going to have a very special guest. That's all I'm going to say for now. We're going to leave it at that. theWizKid and I will be back to see you next week.
If you don't like our show, maybe you should do a little more listening and a little less whining.
Until next time, be cromulent to each other.
Hey, you know what's missing from your life? Yet another variety podcast. My Crumbling Audio brings you just that. Open, humorous, and frank discussion on horror, kink, wrestling, and gaming. Each week, Crumb, that's me, brings my brand of wit and wisdom to you with an in-depth look at some of my, and hopefully your, favorite topics. I'm available on iTunes, and you can plug my RSS feed into your favorite app or search My Crumbling Audio.